thought it might be interesting if you could just talk a little bit about your family history in the area.
Sure. I actually have an interesting set of stories on both sides, both my mother and father's side. So my mother's maiden name is Kenyon, and there are some of the original settlers of this region. As a Kenyon, I am a Mayflower descendant, so I'm a descendant of George Sowell, one of the signers of the Mayflower Compact. And we had intended on having a big Mayflower celebration this year because it's the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower. But we'll see how that turns out. As one of the original settlers, they moved west from New England, and this was the Wild West of the time. This area, they were originally living in Vermont. They're some of the original settlers of Rhode Island, and they were a part of that New England settlement. And then this was opening up, and so they lived on the New York Vermont border, and moved here right around 1815 or so, just after the War of 1812, and became settlers. So they cut down the trees when they came. That's what I like to say. So they're definitely part of the original settlement. There's a little hamlet east of here called Kenyonville, named after a great-great-grandfather. So I've got about 8 generations in the Niagara region here. So they were part of the original settlers. So that's the story from my mother's side. It was only recently I found out the story that's I think is pretty fascinating from my father's side. I found out just about a year ago when I joined Ancestry and did the DNA testing, that I am an Irish Palatine. And this is a very small, descendant from a very, very small group of people. These Palatines were people from the region in Germany, right on the French border, along the Rhine. And they were decimated after the 30 Years' War between Germany and France. And this is in the late 1600s and spilling up into the early 1700s. And they like I said, these people bore the brunt of all the battles. All the war was fought on their territory, and the French had one of the very first scorched earth policies there, where they would go through and it was brutal. I mean, they killed the eldest male member of the household and burnt the fields and burnt the houses, and it was devastating. They did it. They recovered from that and started to rebuild. 12 years later, they did it again. And so these people were just devastated, just devastated. So they were facing also the worst winter that they'd had in 500 years in Europe. This was in 1709. And so there was a pamphlet that had been circulated by some landowner in the colonies who was anxious to populate it with Europeans. And so the Queen of England had paid for a very small group, 35 people, to come and become settlers in the New World. And so this guy, as a landowner, he was kind of clever, if not a little bit nefarious. He circulated a pamphlet telling that the Queen was giving free passage to anybody who wanted to settle in the New World. So 10,000 people descended upon London from this war-torn region of the Palatines, and they were just overwhelmed with this. And of course, the Queen couldn't pay for 10,000 people to transport to the New World, so they started to settle them around in the rural areas of the kingdom, including some plantings in Ireland. And so there was a very, very small group of 100 families that were settled in Limerick, in Ireland. And now, politics being politics, that just has never changed. The lords of the area were supposed to be the administrators of funds that the Queen had dispersed to help settle these people. And so by and large, these guys took the money and just let the people rot. It's just, corruption is not new at all. But Lord Southwell in Limerick was a really upstanding fellow. He took the money that the Queen offered, used it to to help build a village for these people, help them build houses, pay for materials, gave them seed money, gave them money to help get their equipment in order and start to establish a colony of people on his estate. They deferred the rents, and so this was a big opportunity for this small group of 100 people. One of my ancestors was part of that group, and these people became the Irish Palatines. And then after about 150 years, they dispersed from there, moving to Canada, and that's where my father's family came through. But the really interesting story here is that when these Palatines came through England, through London, the Brits were very fastidious record keepers. And so they recorded all the names, the dates, and who was in the group, and what their occupations were. And so my ancestor, Peter Becker, which the name became Baker, he was listed his occupation as vine dresser. So he was a vineyard guy 300 years ago here. So 300 years later, fast forward, here I am being a vineyard guy. So I'm a vine dresser in that same parlance. So I'm sure my ancestor would be proud of me.
Yeah, how incredible that you would have that much detail about your history. I mean, you're really fortunate to be able to have that information.
Well, I kind of dig when I get a hold of something. So I dig in. I'm a pretty good researcher and have a tendency to follow up and dig till I find what I'm looking for. My background is engineering. I'm an engineer by trade, a mechanical guy. Historically, I've worked in the aerospace world. I had about 40 years experience, and I just retired last week. So I am now focusing solely on the winery. But yeah,
you were juggling both before.
Well, yeah, I was working pretty hard. So 2 full-time jobs, right? So, but yeah, I was pretty successful engineer. I had I've got 6 patents. I have stuff in space. I worked on the rocket group at the former Bell Aerospace facility here in Niagara Falls. I ran the structural and thermal analysis group, and I make wine.
Was it hard to walk away?
Less than you thought. So I got to the point where I loved engineering, but I got to the point where it wasn't fun anymore, and it became time for me to lay down the pencil and just pass the torch on to somebody else.
Well, you did a really good job of juggling both your career and your winery.
It was a juggle for sure. So that's definitely for sure.
I know you started out in the winery with the white varietals, and then you went to the reds, and then you went to the exotic Eastern European varietals. So I thought maybe you might want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, life is often driven by circumstances beyond our control. And so I think as good people, you kind of do what you can, and then you kind of go with the flow on the stuff you can't affect, right? So we originally had planned on planting both whites and reds in our first planting, and we were relatively new to the whole process of this. And so while I grew up, in kind of a farming community with working with my grandfather on his farm, I understood basic farming kind of things. When it came down to getting the materials for the vineyard, this was just all new for us. So we had tried to source our vines from a nursery in California, and so we picked out what we wanted to have, our whites, and then a list of our reds that we tried to order, and so we signed the order for the whites. That was no problem. Here's the order for the whites. Just sign here. Okay, no problem. When it got down to the reds, though, they included a request for me to sign an affidavit that I would not be shipping these wines to New York, and they sent it to my New York address. And I was like, I can't sign that. I'm sorry. I can't do it. So. And they said, well, it's never been a problem for anybody else. I said, well, I'm not everybody else. So, I mean, I take this seriously. So if I'm going to sign an affidavit, it's going to be, a legal document that I'm not going to misrepresent myself. So we had to turn down the order for the reds. So we planted our whites and then found another source in New York after shopping around a little bit and got a little bit smarter, and we're able to buy our reds and get them planted the next year.
I'm going to ask a question about the amount of discipline it must have taken for you to spend 10 years shopping for this property.
You know, we kind of knew what we wanted, and we were very serious and had a very clear understanding that while there are a lot of things that you can change once you have a vineyard, you can replant, you can do whatever. You can't change the location, you can't change the soil, you can't change the climate that you're going to be in. So we were very careful to make sure that we got the right site. And so we looked and looked and looked and looked. And I had, as the engineer in me, I had studied the climate charts, I had studied the soil maps, I knew this, you know, frontwards and backwards. And so when it came time to finally, you know, locate this place, when this came up for sale, I knew exactly what this was. I said, okay, this is in that sweet spot, the location from the lake. We know that you know, it's not in the dead zone. That's in between the lake and the escarpment, and so we knew this was the right property. This would be known locally as a piece of cherry ground that has a very, very strong particular meaning to farmers here, particularly fruit farmers, because while cherries will grow pretty much anywhere in the region, they really only deliver the full flavor profile when they're on a particular piece of well-drained soil with just the right characteristics. And this soil has all that. So the best use for this property outside of my vineyard would be to grow cherries. So they're very, very fussy.
So how did you get involved with the Eastern European varietals?
That's an interesting story too. We had gone to the Finger Lakes region of New York, which is the largest wine region here in New York. Is Finger Lakes, and there's a large festival that they hold there, the Finger Lakes Wine Festival. It's in Watkins Glen, and they had 3 large tents. I mean, really quite large tents, where they had 100 wineries represented. And we were still actually in the very, very much the planning stages for the winery. So we had the vineyard, and we had grapes planted, you know, but we hadn't built the winery yet, and hadn't made wine. So it was our intent to grow and make, you know, classic French varieties. That's the genesis of the name of Chateau Niagara, and we wanted them to represent our place. So nothing says French varieties like Chateau, and nothing says the sense of place here as Niagara. So that's how we got to Chateau Niagara. But so we went to this this Finger Lakes Wine Festival, and with 100 wineries, you know, in there, you have to have a plan, else you're just, you know, going crazy. So we stuck with a plan of just tasting the Bordeaux blends that people had there. So there was a number of those, and so we weren't going to taste every winery and rewind at every winery. That would be a disaster. So we had really selected just focusing on the Bordeaux reds. So we're going along, and I was, quite frankly, extremely disappointed in the reds that we were tasting from the Finger Lakes. I thought, well, this is not at all what we wanted. We knew that, you know, that better wines could be made, and we were kind of disappointed in through tasting as we went through this. And then we came to a winery called McGregor Vineyards, and the McGregor family owns this. John McGregor is a friend of mine. I've since become friends with him, but it's after this event took place. So we're tasting wines, and we tasted a wine they had there called Black Russian Red. And this is a blend of Saperavi and Cyrexia Charny. And I tasted this wine, and it was phenomenal. It was very, very, very much a standout. And that actually put me on this 10-year hunt to find the Saperavi grape. And it was that tasting that was this pivotal shift in how we did things. We said, so we said, that's phenomenal. If this grape can be that good and this wine can be that good, what else is there out there that we're missing that comes from Eastern Europe that, you know, could be phenomenal if done, you know, with an eye towards Western quality and grown here? And so it really did cause us to shift. So I started looking into some of the grapes and wines that were there from the region. Our bull's blood is one of those Eastern European wines, and it's a control blend it's the national red wine of Hungary. So it's a control blend in Hungary, and they allow 13 grapes into the blend, and you have to use at least 3 of the grapes on the list. We do follow the Hungarian tradition using Cabernet Franc, Blaufrankisch, and a Hungarian grape called Turan. Now, when I was on the search for my Saperavi, I'd come in contact with a gentleman out on the West Coast who had allegedly had some Saperavi, and I contacted him and asked for some cuttings, and he sold me some cuttings, and we shipped them in. And while he shipped them in, he also shipped me in some cuttings of Turan. And so we were able to establish the Turan here in the East, and I don't think anybody else has it in the East. I think he's probably the only guy that has it in the West. But we were able to plant that when we were doing this. So when we started doing some of these things, we realized I have all the grapes that I could be making a bull's blood immediately. So I started to when we were able to have the grapes planted, we were able to bring in some of the crop and start making some of our first amounts of bull's blood. So I started looking for a little further afield. So what else is there? So we were able to secure some Saperavi and plant that. And that's been a phenomenal grape for us, as we'll find out in a little while. But it's been a tremendous grape. As to best of my knowledge, there are only 6 growers and vintners of the Saperavi grape here in the U.S. So there are other people that are now growing it, but people that grow and make wine from it in their winery. There are 6, 4 in New York, 1 in Ohio, and 1 in Pennsylvania.
Your wines have won a number of awards. You won a lot of awards. Are there certain awards that you're very proud of? Sure.
There's a handful of them involved in the American Fine Wine Competition, which is held down in Florida, and this is an invitation-only competition. So all of the wines that are to be involved in that have to be curated. So there's people that travel around as part of that competition, and they taste the wines, and then once they've tasted the wines, they will make a recommendation, and then you'll get an invitation to submit your wines to that. So that's limited to like 600 wineries in the U.S. And so that's a pretty small club. But the president of the American Fine Wine Competition has been here a number of times, and it was just a happy circumstance that her daughter and granddaughter live in the area. So she was visiting them and happened to pop in and tasted the wines and said, "Wow, these are really phenomenal. You just earned an invitation to this competition." So we've got a number of awards from them. We've recently got gold awards for our Cab Franc and our Saperavi, scoring 90 points for the Cab Franc and 92 points for the Saperavi. And now this is in competition with wines from all across the U.S. The other one that I think is kind of interesting is for our Saperavi. They've held an international Saperavi competition, which was held in Tbilisi in Georgia, and this is where the wine grape originated from. And so this was an invitation only. So we were able to have 2 different submittals for 2 different occasions for that. Our Kagor was in the very first one. We took a bronze for that, but we submitted our dry red Saperavi into this. And now this is standing up now against all the fine dry wines of Saperavi from around the world. And we took a silver on the world stage for that Saperavi, which was, I think, pretty impressive. Coming up on harvest, this year is looking to be about 10 days early. So I have a series of measurements that I take on the grapes. So the first and foremost is sugar. We measure sugars, and as we start to get very close to harvest, I will take a series of other tests. So I will measure the sugar, I will measure and I will take a larger sample. And I do this in the field with a refractometer. I take a sample of 20 berries, crush them, and put the drop of juice on the refractometer and measure the sugars that way. And that's a pretty standard way to do that in the field. But once we get a little closer to harvest, we think we're getting pretty close, I will take a larger sample of probably like 100 berries. We will bring them into the lab. We will crush them, press them out to get the juice, and I will do a full panel of tests on that. So I will test for laboratory grade sugar. I will test for the pH. I will test for the titratable acidity. I will taste the juice and bite the skin. I know what the skin is tasting like, and I look for sometimes nature does give you even smaller clues that don't require such fancy efforts, but we look for the seeds. So we know when the seeds are green that they are underripe, and when the seeds turn brown, why that is one of the indicators that we look for that the grapes are nearing readiness.
And the grapes are picked, so you have I guess contract labor that comes in and pick the grapes for you.
Well, we used to pick this all by hand, and oddly enough, people really like our wine, and they would like it so much that, and like us so much, it appears that they would want to be part of it. So we actually had harvested for like the last decade with all volunteer labor. So people would come and they would want to be part of the harvest. They would come and they would pick, and we would schedule this so that we would do this on a Saturday morning, and we would able to arrange for enough people to be there so that nobody had to work too hard, and that we were able to pick all the grapes of a certain variety that we had planned in that morning, and then that we would get everybody to come up. We would bring up, my crew and I would bring up the grapes, and my wife and I would put on this big spread, and we'd have these long tables down the middle of the winery and have this fantastic lunch all prepared for everybody. And they would, we would have harvested the grapes, and then we would come in and we would eat and drink and tell lies and have an altogether grand time. And then people would go on their way, and then they would kind of circle back, a few months later and say, how's my wine coming? So there was a very strong personal connection that they felt to it, and it was part of the experience of being here, and part of the fun of Chateau Niagara. So we did that for a decade, and I thank the Lord of all things that we were able to get through this for a decade, but I realized that this could not go on forever. So last year we bought a harvester. So a little bit of that charm, I think, is lost by the fact that we're not having people hand harvest with us anymore. But boy, a lot of back-breaking labor is gone, and we're able to pick with a harvester now. So I think that bodes well for us. We're on what we refer to as the Niagara Lake Plain. There is a Niagara Escarpment and a Niagara Lake Plain. So Niagara Escarpment is this physical feature that runs, all along the south of the shoreline of Lake Ontario, modern Lake Ontario, and it forms Niagara Falls. And so it also forms the High Falls in Rochester, New York, and it turns around and goes up into Canada, and then all the way up into the Bruce Peninsula. So this is quite a very, very large physical feature. In our area, it's about a 250-foot, basically, step change in the land. If you see it, it looks like it's a fault. It looks like it's a major fault, but it's not. It's the shoreline of an ancient glacial lake, Lake Iroquois, that used to be here. And so when the glaciers receded, there was this massive lake, freshwater lake that was here, and there was an ice dam. Once that broke free, the lake drained down to the current level of Lake Ontario. And so imagine something the size of Lake Ontario going inland another 20 miles, but 250 foot deeper. That volume of water drained out, forming the St. Lawrence, and some of the spillover ended up cutting part of the channel for the Hudson River. So big geological effect on the area. And so that affects our climate in a couple of really cool ways. So first off, it's also responsible for the soils that we have here. So these are all lake-laid sands and soils, and one of our property is on a little bit of a sand and gravel bar, and so we've got these really exceptionally well-drained soils that would be, as we mentioned earlier, would be known locally as cherry ground. So this is exceptional. It works if there is an outlet, and we have 18 Mile Creek across the road from us. So the water from our property drains through a culvert and down to 18 Mile Creek. So we've got an outlet for this. So our soils are just exceptionally well drained. The escarpment is a really critical and important physical feature. Lake Ontario is a very deep lake, much deeper than you might imagine. If you look at the map, Erie and Ontario look like twins, but Ontario is 3 times deeper than Erie. Erie freezes over, Ontario does not. It means open throughout the winter, so that the lake surface does not freeze. It freezes along the edge of the lake, but you have to go out very far before you've got navigable waters again. So that effect, that big temperature sink of 32 degrees really affects our climate. So it is actually, it warms us throughout the winter, protecting us from really deep winter chills. It also holds us back in the spring, so that our spring is later than it is above the escarpment. But once you get below the escarpment, that spring is held back. That's good for the vines, because if they bud early and then they get a late frost, the vines are badly damaged. You might not get a crop. But the reverse is true at the back end of the year, and so into the fall, why the lake holds that warmth in as the warm air rises up off of the lake and moves inland. It's stopped by the barrier that's the Niagara Escarpment. So that 250-foot step change is an edge, and the air warms around, and so it extends our seasons, so that we can harvest. I have harvested as late as first week in November. So yeah, so it really does extend our season considerably.
I read that you would be the first winery in the Western Hemisphere to make a sweet wine with 10% residual sugar.
So that might not be exactly true if you phrase it that way, but our Russian Kagor,
yes,
we are the only winery in the Western Hemisphere to make a Russian Kagor. So yeah, that style of wine, we are the only ones.
And that's a dessert wine?
I hesitate to say the D word because people tend to think of it as sweet, but the wine itself, I sell it almost exclusively to my dry wine drinkers, because it's really about flavor. So it's 10% RS, true. I can't lie, but it's not about the sweetness. It's about the flavor. The flavor of this wine is tremendously unique. It's exceptionally complex. Has cherry and elderberry, and it shifts when you taste it, and you hold it in your mouth. It just takes you on this roller coaster journey of flavors that ends through tobacco and blueberry and all kinds of. There's a little spicy note in there, and just all kinds of interesting flavors. With definitely a chocolate note in there, and so while it's true that it is sweet, it's the sweetness is there just as an augmentation to the flavor of the wine.
Well, do you want to talk about the wines you sent us?
Absolutely. Gewürztraminer, the name means the spice grape from Trammen. Trammen is a little town in the South Tyrol, which is actually in the northeast of Italy. So this very German-sounding wine is actually Italian. People there consider themselves Tyrolean and not Italian, and the 97% speak German. It's part of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was annexed by Italy after World War I. But it is the spice grape. It has a tendency towards floral nose with savory spice on the palate, often made sweet. This is a dry Gewürz. And this makes this our go-to food wine for an unbelievable amount of things. We reach for this more often than you can imagine. Anytime we've got anything spicy or intensely flavored, we reach for this. But our favorite way to enjoy this is with Italian sausage on the grill. So this is a white wine on a stand-up for grilled sausage. Light roast scent, big savory spice, finish with a hint of mint.
When you say mint, I'm thinking mint, and I think I do taste the mint. So tell me a little bit about the aging process with this wine.
My whites are all done in steel. So they are aged depending upon whether I want to accentuate the mouthfeel or not. They are either aged on the lees or not. These guys, I've kind of steered away from that because of the beautiful fruit that we get here. So I want a lot of these wines to be more fruit driven. So I think you'll find that's the hallmark of our wines is grapefruit, and that's because of this Niagara region that we're in. So these are just aged in steel. We go about 9 months, and then we determine that they're ready to go. Riesling Rosine. It's the name of a grape and the name of a process. This Rosine process. So this is based very loosely on the Italian appassimento process, where they dry the grapes prior to making the wine. I modified that process to the point where it created a new process. And I was able to check with a couple of people in the industry that I know well and trust, and disclose the details of the process too, and ask their opinion as to whether that really represented a new process or just, you know, a variant. And they were both quite adamant that this was absolutely a brand new process, and that it was really quite unlike anything that they'd ever had before. And so yeah, I said, so that's legit. So that's a new process. We did talk to some people about trademarking it and you know kind of patenting the process. We came to the conclusion that the best thing that we could do would be to just keep the process details secret, and just we don't disclose all that we do to make this wine. But I do tell some of the parts of it that make it kind of interesting. So, so as I say, we did modify that Italian process, and in the Italian process, you know, the appassimento process, they dry the grapes in big open air barns for long periods of times. I dry mine rather rapidly in some dryers that we have here that were constructed by a friend of mine, so with heat and air movement, we kind of dry these rather rapidly. And so this heated area where we dry the grapes forms an incubator for the Botrytis cinerea that grows on the surface of the grapes out in the field. That's a very naturally occurring fungus that grows out in the field. I don't add that or do anything to to encourage it. It just happens. It's always there, just ever present. And so Botrytis cinerea in a controlled state is responsible for an exceptionally cool set of mid-palate flavors. So you get these really cool things. And so while we're drying these grapes in the dryer, we dry them to full-on raisins, which is very definitely different than the Italian process.
I was going to ask if they turn to raisins.
So we do dry them to full-on raisins, and so I call the process Rosina, a little bit of an homage to the Italians that came before me, because you know, sounds like Aunt Rosina's out in the kitchen, right? It is actually the German word for raisin, because as I said, as part of our process, we dry these guys, and I did it. They were German grapes, so I thought it was pretty cool. I like a little double entendre there. This Botrytis cinerea is responsible for these really cool mid-palate flavors of pineapple and tropical fruit, guava, that kind of thing. So you get this upfront citrus character. It moves rather smoothly into this tropical fruit note, pineapple tropical fruit, and then it ends with kind of a dried apricot kind of character. It's just off dry, So it's got this balance of sugar and acid that comes from the raisins. So the acidity is raised up, so it's a little more intensely flavored, but it's got the right amount of sugar to offset it. So it's balanced like it is in the grape. It also has kind of a creamy mouthfeel to it, which is very, very unique. You never see a Riesling with this kind of weighty, creamy mouthfeel. So this is an absolutely unique wine to us. This is something that I think that I've created that's just absolutely lovely. And I love to tell people this is an incredibly dangerous hot tub wine. Crawl into a hot tub with a bottle of this, it will just disappear and you won't know how it went away.
Boy, that's just delightful. So smooth and fruity.
Isn't it?
I've got to know what happens after they turn to raisins. What do you do with them then?
That's when the magic happens.
Oh.
If you would just patent your invention, you could tell everyone about it.
I would have to tell everyone about it in order to patent it. So yeah, we'll just not do that.
Well, that's really, really wonderful. Very delightful.
Catherine Todd is a wine writer in New York, and she's one of the people that I really like and trust in the wine world. She was one of the people I contacted about this process, and she wrote this glowing review. She said, just when I thought I had every kind of Riesling that I can have, I get this from Jim Baker. So I'm like, yes, that was great fun.
I think this would be my go-to everyday wine. Do you have a tasting room there that people can visit and try the wine?
We have a single facility that is one big room, and then the back half of it is all production, and the front half of it is tasting room, and so we kind of have a open kimono kind of affair here. So when people see all the tanks and the barrels and hoses and fork trucks and right next to the tasting bar where they're at. So we have plans for a new tasting room. If you can see on the bottle, we've got our building that we're currently in, and on the side of it there's a new tasting room that we're going to be we had planned on building in March, but some other things happened in the world, and so that put the kibosh on that. So we weren't able to pull the trigger on that. But see these barrels behind me?
Yeah.
They're all full.
Oh, they're full?
Oh.
Yeah, they're full. I've got to empty these out and bottle those guys before harvest because I need space. It's going to happen. So they've got to get those empty and get those ready to go.
Well, it's really
What are you
nice.
doing? What are you doing next week?
I wish.
I wish we could fly to New York, but we're sort of stuck here now.
Yeah.
There's a window where you can properly grow Cabernet Franc. And if you grow it in too cool a climate or too short a growing season, you get this bell pepper note in the wine, this green pepper note. It's caused by a chemical called methoxypyrazine. Methoxypyrazine is created by the plant, the Cabernet Franc vine, creates that as a deterrent to the birds so that they don't pick the grape before the seed is viable, right? So they don't want the grape picked before the seed can reproduce, you know. Once the seed is viable, why the grape gets rid of the methoxypyrazine because the plant wants the birds to disperse the seed. That's nature, right? That's how it works. So if you're tasting a Cabernet Franc and it has this bell pepper note, it is by very definition made with underripe grapes. Now there's a lot of sommeliers out there that will tell you, oh, it has to have a little bit of the bell pepper. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It's just an underripe grape. You know, you grow it in a warm enough region, you don't have to have that, and you're able to grow it out. If you go too hot a climate, then what you find is the acids fall down. The grape loses its acidity, and the acids prop up the flavor profile. So the flavors is held up by the acids. If the acids drop too much, the wine just becomes flabby, it's just flat and just not useful. And that happens in Bordeaux. And so the Bordeaux region of France, you know, they use Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot as their basis of that classic Bordeaux wine. And so that wine there would be 5% or less Cabernet Franc. And it's only used as a blending grape because they're just a little too warm. So the Finger Lakes region of New York, a little too cool. They're not able to really grow out that bell pepper note in the grape. Now, there may be a few examples where they're able to grow it out, because there's a few far between for sure. So, but in general, here in Niagara, we are able to grow out that Cabernet, that bell pepper note. And so it's critical that we're able to get it. So there's this window where you get this perfect growing conditions to be able to do this grape. And so as such, the Cabernet Franc is our signature red grape. We believe it to be the signature wine of the winery and the signature grape of the region. We were recently part of the National Cab Franc Day celebration. This is a December 4th, this is Cab Franc Day. We were asked to participate in this. We were one of 12 wineries selected across the United States to reflect the various growing regions of Cabernet Franc. Pretty substantial honor for a little winery in Newfane. We think so. It is the 5th year in a row we've been selected. So I think that's quite an honor. We are obviously doing something very right with this grape. On Cab Franc Day, they have a series of national bloggers that review the wines, and they rotate these guys through, so you don't always get the same guy reviewing the wines. So they always have new fresh tasters for Cab Franc Day. The reviewers routinely say, wow, this is a phenomenal wine. How come I never heard of this winery or this region before? What's going on here? How did we miss these guys? And I think that's a pretty big honor for us, where we're pretty happy with that. So their tasting notes they would say really bright cherry character, silky smooth tannins, secondary notes of plum, tertiary notes of cedar and graphite. These are all classic Cabernet Franc definitions, tasting notes that you find in the finest Cab Francs in the world. One of the reviewers tasted this, and he says it's like a Chinon, only better, which is a region in France known for their Cabernet Franc. So I'm like, I'll take that all day. That's awesome. So I think this is just an absolutely stunning version of what Cabernet Franc is. It's just a beautiful grape. This is my baby. Those reviewers aren't wrong. That's a beautiful wine.
So your window for picking, you said, is really narrow. You have to get it just right. Is it pretty, like you're talking about a week or days?
So it's the difference between the Finger Lakes and us is about 2 to 3 weeks. So once we hit our target, for the grape, we'll pick it.
And what would be your favorite meal to serve with this wine?
So I have a number of meals that I list for my red wines. All kinds of various foods with it. I'm a big carnivore, so those are always beef. But this is a prime red.
And this is your gold 90-point wine. I think this would be my go-to wine every day.
You keep changing that. So every day. That's a good sign, right?
I think this bottle is what, 29?
Yeah, this and my Saperavi are my most expensive wines.
I mean, I just think that's really reasonable and very affordable, and to get such quality. Well,
thank you. I tend to agree. I think it is. I think it is for the quality that it represents. I think it's a very, very good price point.
So local restaurants probably all coming to you looking for wine to buy.
You would think that's the case, but that is 100% not the case. So the restaurant business is very difficult, and I understand. As a business owner, I understand their challenges. Their margins are really slim, and so by and large, they don't want to take a chance on what to many of their customers would be an unknown winery. Once they open a bottle, they get roughly 4 glasses out of a bottle. They have to recover the entire cost of the bottle on the first glass because they don't know if they're going to sell anymore.
So the only way you sell your wines is through people, like through your wine club or people coming to your winery.
That's correct. So we have a very, very limited distribution outside of that. We have one liquor store in Buffalo. That's a fine liquor store in the north side of the city. That is in the better neighborhoods there. That carries our wines. They bought a bunch of wine. They haven't reordered. So, but they do carry them. So I'll have to say that they do carry them. I have to mention the Wine and Liquor Outlet in Lockport, which has been a long-standing supporter of us. They don't carry my best wines, but they do carry some of my sweeter ones for the local palate. The local palate here is sweet. They just don't appreciate the fine wines as much. And a new wine bar has opened up in a Buffalo suburb of Lancaster called Six Friends Cabernet, and they have been exceptional at promoting our wine. So they got a business model that celebrates New York wines, and we are one of the flagships of their place where they really celebrate, you know, the wines that we have, which they believe are exceptional, and their clientele. They sell it to their clients, so they get them to taste it, and they say, "Wow, these are phenomenal wines." And these are local. Are you telling me these are local? Yeah. Okay. So they do a great business with it. We do a summer event called Picnic, that being the French term for picnic. So we do kind of a little French-themed picnic. It's a little bit different than, you know, the local fireman's picnic, you know, which is, you know, hot dogs and beer. So we serve up a plate of a smoked pork tartine, which is like a bruschetta, with smoked pork and our gorgonzola mustard, chicken Provence, all with herbs from our garden grown on the property. We do roasted potato wedges, again with herbs from our garden. And then we make a ratatouille, again with, you say it with me, herbs from our garden. But we do that, you know, a whole plate of that food and a glass of wine for 25 bucks. Is a pretty reasonable thing. We have pretty good support for that. We pick a theme because I like to cook. So I work with a chef. She's a good friend of ours, and so there's always a very spirited discussion on what the theme and the recipes will be, what the plates will be. So, but 5 courses, and each paired with a wine specifically designed for that theme, for like $65. We do that. We did a frontier dinner where we had all local, like Native American fare, as well as classic old English things. So there's lots of fun things that we do here. We're able to do things because we're small. We're very versatile and very nimble. We can do what we want. One of the things that people will tell you is you can't get good wine in New York, and you particularly can't get good reds. I think if we had tasted some of our other reds, you would be just as equally impressed with those. But the Cabernet Franc is exceptional, and I think this is a stellar example of a fantastic red wine from New York, just substantial quality. But they'll say, okay, maybe you can get some good reds, but you can't get a big red in New York. And so they love their California wines and say, oh, well, you can't get a big red. So this is our challenge to that, of us being able to deliver a big red. Well, there we go. Thank you. That was my lovely wife's hand. Yeah. So Saperavi is a grape from the country of Georgia over in Eastern Europe. This is where winemaking began on our planet. They have some recent archaeological digs have uncovered what they believe to be the first winery in the world in Georgia. This is not shocking because the Vitis vinifera grape evolved in that region. Now the Turks and the Georgians go back and forth claiming that who had the first grape. So I'm not going to enter that fray, but the archaeologists have confirmed the first winery that has been discovered is in Georgia, in Tbilisi. So they have a winemaking culture that goes back 8 millennia. They predate the pyramids by 3,000 years. It's an incredible story. It's difficult to wrap my head around something being 3,000 years older than the pyramids, but they have fantastic culture, fantastic people, very small country, about the size of New York and Pennsylvania combined. They have over 900 producers of Saperavi in Georgia. Just incredible. So this is their national red wine grape. They're very, very proud people. I've met a number of Georgians because we produce this. There are only 6 of us that grow and vinify this grape here in the U.S. 4 of us in New York, 1 in Ohio, 1 in Pennsylvania. But this is a very serious grape. The name Saperavi means dye, D-Y-E, in the Georgian language. They used to use this as a clothing dye. In fact, there is no phrase in the Georgian language for red wine. They only have a phrase that means black wine. The flavor profile on this is fruit like a Zinfandel, pepper like a Syrah. So think of a Zin Syrah blend. Think of it, but it's big body, a substantial body. And people are shocked they're able to generate wine of this caliber of body here in New York. So, I mean, I would say just taste to believe. So cool climates can deliver some really fascinating wines. And so the world should be perhaps a little more open to wines from various regions that offer some interesting taste profiles. I think we've demonstrated some of those today. I think we've got some really fascinating wines that are available to be found, and we would encourage people to visit New York and try New York wines. So our wine club is we kind of set this up as because Kathy and I are very friendly people. We kind of set this up as a very customer friendly kind of wine club. It's not like a lot of wine clubs that, you know, this is certainly not going to be like the record club of the month where they send you the record no matter what, you know. We don't do that. So our traditional discounts that we offer for the winery are 5% on 6 bottles and 10% on a case. Our wine club offers full 20% discount on any bottle that you buy. So there's no minimum. So you get full 20% off on all the way down to one single bottle. It's free tastings for up to 4. If you're in the area and want to visit the winery, you get free tastings. You can come in every day. I don't care. We're able to accommodate that. So people, I want them to feel special. You get the red carpet treatment if you come here as a wine club member. We make this something exceptional. When we started the wine club, we thought that you know, we might get 30 people. We were kind of guessing that might be a reasonable number to get to. This was a year and a half ago. We're currently at about 260. It's just exploded. So the only requirement that we have for this, there's no cost to join the wine club, and the only requirement that we have is that we ask you to buy 12 bottles within a 12-month period. Oh, so we also have some special wines that I make as kind of R&D wines, as the kind of slightly mad scientist that I am. I'm always creating something new, and so I've got a series of wines that I've made that the wine club members are the only ones that get access to. So we have them available only to wine club members. So we'll do an experimental wine. Maybe it will be a true experiment, and I make a very small batch, and it's not for anybody but me to figure it out. But once I decide to make a commercial batch, that might be just a single barrel of something that becomes something that's very special, and we offer that up to the wine club members as a special treat for being part of our wine club. You get access to these wines that are here. And I've made some interesting wines. So currently in my inventory of barrels behind me that are wine club member only, I have a true Cabernet Franc Appassimento. That's the Italian style of drying the grapes. That is not the Rosina process, but the old style, traditional Appassimento process. I've made a kind of a souped up version of the Saperavi that we're calling Saperavi Express. If you can imagine me souping this up anymore, but it is an absolutely phenomenal wine that I think after making it for the wine, we haven't even bottled it yet, but after making it for the wine club, I'm quite convinced that we're going to go full tilt on this and make this a regular item on the menu. Maybe I might be at a point where only my wine club members get it because they're the ones buy it all up before anybody else has access to it. But yeah, so there's always something that the research and development fellow that I've been my whole career has to still continues. He's there. He still has to express himself, and so he's going to do it through these wines. And we make these available just to the wine club members.
How do you communicate with your wine club members about these unusual bottles that you have? Do you send out emails and let them?
Yeah, so we have an email list. When you join the wine club, you sign up for an email. We don't spam people, so We send out a newsletter once in the spring, once in the fall, when we're announcing, that the new wines are available. The white wines are released in the spring, and the red wines are released in the fall. And so that we'll have to be bottling these guys up and drafting that newsletter out soon. I'll talk about what the year in the vineyard was like, and let people know what we can expect for this 2020 season, and which should be phenomenal, by the way. We're looking forward to an exceptional season. But we do that. We put this in a little winemaker's notes for the newsletter for the winery, wine club, and any kind of other notes things that have happened during the year that might be of interest that people, like I will probably more than once mention that I've retired from my day job and able to devote full attention to this. But when these wine club members come in, we really do make a special effort to make them feel exceptionally welcome. I mean, generally we're gregarious people, and we make everybody feel welcome, but if we try to roll the red carpet out for them. These people have been carrying us through the coronavirus. When our tasting room was shut down for 2 months, we couldn't open for tastings, but we could sell out the door, so for curbside kind of pickup. People called and came and bought cases and cases and cases of wine, and they kept us afloat. And I'm ever grateful for that. These are people that got it. They say this is a small business in Western New York, but it's something that we can't let fail. We have to keep going. We could not allow a tragedy like this to have us fail. So I'm ever grateful for that.
Jim, this has really been an honor to talk to you today. I really
Thank you.
enjoyed this, and it's just been so educational and so entertaining. And I want you to know that we're going to surprise you one day. We're going to show up on your doorstep.
That would be awesome. I would love it.
And we're also going to join your wine club.
Oh, excellent.
I think it's just really, you have a great selection of wines, and I want to see your newsletter.
Oh, thank you. She doesn't want me to put her in the camera. So.
Okay. Hello, Candy.
Hi.
Okay. Now I've got her voice.
Yeah.
Here I am.
Here she is.
Hi, Candy.
Hi.
Thank you for helping with all the wine bottles, and
No problem.
it's been really delightful talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you have a great harvest. I know that's coming up.
Thank you. Well, absolutely. We're looking forward to it. Trying to get another vintage in the barrel.